pretty as Nick though, so he'll always.
Nick's a pretty boy. He's a pretty guy. He's a it's funny. There's boy, guy, and man, and I see us as guys. And to me, a man is like my dad, if that makes sense. Like, and a boy is my son. And
Yeah.
I feel like a dude. I feel like a guy. You know what I mean? Like, yes, I'm a man. You're a man. We are men. But I just feel like men are older than me.
Mm, that's true.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
that makes
Do men play
sense.
toy soldiers? I don't know. Guys do. Guys definitely do.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in. Mini Wargamer Dave here from miniwargaming.com. Welcome Wargamers to the Shrine of Chaos. Today my special guest is Jim Vesal. He is a tournament player. He is known throughout the competitive community for a player who knows no bounds when it comes to playing Chaos Space Marines. I'm just throwing that in there. I'm excited that you play Chaos. I want to talk to you about the new Chaos stuff and what Ninth Edition means for that. And I thought it would be interesting to get a tournament player, competitive player perspective on that. Me not being any of those things, never having actually participated in a tournament proper. I'm your beer and pretzels kind of player. I'm a casual gamer, and I represent the guys that play not at the same level by any means that you play at. There's actually a very small percentage of the players that play at the level that you play at, which is pretty cool. It's very neat seeing that, and I just wanted to kind of talk about it a little bit. So is there anything, first and foremost, about the new Ninth Edition main rules that have changed that stick out automatically that you think will be huge changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the biggest change is army creation. So I think eighth edition was really about maximizing detachments, maximizing mixing and matching as to maximize the amount of different rules you could kind of fit in. Like trying to get stratagems from 3 different books was like key, and that was one of the things that made those really good lists.
Getting a lot of command points, the kind of command point farming almost.
Yeah, so I think the changes to army creation, especially with the detachment rules, not only has an effect on the way that we build armies, but also it changes which armies are good. So it kind of has like a double effect on the meta.
Yeah.
Because now we're seeing a lot of the armies that struggled with command points really going to be powerhouses. So Custodes, Grey Knights, Death Guard, some of these armies that really struggled to put together lists.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see some really, really gross lists come out of there. So I'm really excited about that. I have mixed feelings about it, being a Chaos player that basically collected Death Guard, Thousand Sons, Demons, Chaos Knights, Chaos Space Marines, and enjoyed mixing and matching all those different books together to create like really fun armies. And my army is all very like themed together. So I'm gonna a little bit sad that I won't be able to kind of do that as much. So I'm hoping that with the FAQ and hopefully there are some changes that will allow me to still incorporate some of those kind of chaotic elements, because I definitely feel like of all the different factions, Chaos is the one that feels the best when you do that kind of mix and match. Like Chaos Space Marines with demons and like Beastmen and like Chaos Knights, that's such a like iconic thing, and it's something that you definitely like read about. It's not that often where it's just demons or it's just Chaos Space Marines. They always have those kind of like demonic allies and stuff like that. So I'm really hoping there is a little bit of room in there for that kind of mix and match, because I missed the old like I used to be a big fantasy player, and the first chaos book I had was demons, beastmen, and warriors all in one book.
Yeah,
so I kind of missed that like that dynamic of having that kind of chaotic mix.
It is lore appropriate to have all. Ironically enough, it's lore appropriate. Whereas you see it in a tournament, and you kind of come to expect stuff like that, and it feels like a tournament list. But ironically, it is closer to the lore than just typical single armies that you would see. Yeah,
and I guess you could say the same about the Imperium and stuff, but
true. That's true.
Like, I definitely feel like Chaos has always been portrayed as like, there's that sneaky little demon in the background whispering to the Chaos Lord, and he needs a few thousand sacrifices before he's going to show up with his forces. So I always enjoyed that.
Prove your worth first, then we'll reinforce it. Very cool. So Death Guard, that's an interesting one, because with the command point thing, they have a boost there. I found that with them they were already tough and resilient, but they feel like they're even more tough, even more resilient now. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I mean, so they've gotten two boosts. So first is obviously the changes to the army composition. So now,
Yeah.
Death Guard troops, they don't have a ton of characters generally. So if you're playing pure Death Guard to do like multiple battalions, you're sometimes picking characters that aren't great. Like even their Lord of Contagions, so they don't have the traditional chaos buffs. So they're getting a boost in the sense that like they don't have to take as much tax. Plague Marines are not cheap, and Foxwalkers are not amazing. And then on the other side, they got that great Psychic Awakening. I think they got like 27 stratagems between the core ones plus the like chapter Legion specific ones.
Yeah.
So I think they're kind of getting that double boost. The real test will be to see when the Grand Tournament book drops and kind of seeing how the points shake out, because I think if we see huge increases in the demon engines and like Plague Marines and stuff, I mean it could end up kind of canceling out some of those gains. But if they take modest increases relative to everything else, I think they're going to be a big. I think they're going to be a big player in Ninth, especially given the new mission structure and really how it's based around resiliency and holding the midboard, which I think Death Guard are excellent at. So yeah. I'm excited to kind of. I bought actually. I tracked down those like limited edition Japanese Death Guard models, and I paid way too much money for them. But the models are just amazing, and I was like super excited to paint them. So I think I paid like $110 Canadian for the paint kit with the sorcerer.
Yeah.
So it works out actually okay because it comes with like 8 paints plus a brush. So it ends up being about $60 for like a single sorcerer model, which is pretty pricey for like a single character, but it's such a cool model. So I'm very excited to paint those up.
I don't disagree. They're very good looking on the battlefield. So I'm going to tell you about a couple games that I played recently using 9th edition rules. In the army compositions that I used, and it's all in my mind. It's all experimental at this stage. It's like on paper you think something would look good and it's fun to try it out, and then in practical application of it, I find that because of the secondaries, you are pleasantly surprised how good or bad some things actually turn out to be, and I think GW has done a good job at. GW and the playtesters, like the community as a whole, they've done really a very good job at balancing that aspect of the game and not having before you could see two armies and just by looking at the armies you could be like, oh yeah, okay, that army is definitely going to win. It's a clear winner. Why even do it? Whereas now, because of the secondaries, I find that it's like, oh, okay, if you're bringing that kind of army, then I'm going to focus on these secondaries and they're going to help me score points. And so I think from the get-go, that's really good. And the missions themselves are it's not an automatic, okay, if I go first I win. Sometimes it's better to go second. You get the advantages of both going first and going second for different reasons, also depending on the secondaries that you get, because some are progressive and some are end of game, which I love. I love those games that go back and forth really close, and whoever the winner is, no matter who wins, you've had fun because it was a good fight along the way. That's my preferred playstyle. I'm not sure how it is in the competitive scene, if that is the preferred game or I'm beating you, therefore I'm winning. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, definitely the best competitive games I've ever had have been the ones that are the closest. So yeah. I never I've played games where it's like a blowout when before even the first dice is rolled, how the game's gonna end. That's obviously if you're all you care about is winning a tournament. Yeah, I mean, I guess you're happy with that.
Sure.
But for me, a big part of playing competitively is really pitting my my skill against the opponent's skill and having that kind of chess game, that mental chess game. And so when that is imagine playing chess against a 3-year-old. I mean, that's not going to be very fun if you know that the outcome already. So for me, I'd much rather play a hard, close-fought competitive game.
Yeah.
That's way more fun, and those are the games that I remember the most.
Yeah.
Versus a game where I roll up to the table and I'm like, okay, I already know how this game's gonna end because of maybe how the lists are designed or the scenario, and that's happened. A lot of times, especially like the first few rounds of the event, when you kind of get the random seeds. It's the Swiss system hasn't really taken over yet. You often play those kinds of games. And I've also played games where my hardest game was the first game.
Hmm.
So it's definitely something that I always look for in a good competitive game, is that kind of tension of who's going to win. And you want the game to feel like it comes down to a few specific instances of like action and a few dice rolls,
Yeah.
and at the end, like it's like that excitement of the game being back and forth. That for me is like the best games, and some of the closest games I've had have been the ones that come down to like the final dice roll or like the final combat or whatever. And I think this edition helps those is going to encourage those types of games because eighth edition was a lot about the Alpha Strike.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel like with and you could kind of get a lead early enough that especially depending on if you're playing say ITC or Nova missions or some of the other mission sets outside of chapter approved, there's definitely scenarios where you can get a big enough lead where you've won the game by turn 3. And so I think now with things like strategic reserves, being able to kind of hide those really key units and vehicles being a little bit more mobile, I think, and obviously hopefully the terrain rules, which I'd love to talk about later, but I actually think they're not as like I think they could have gone a little bit farther with them as far as like line of sight and stuff. But
Okay.
I actually think that the game is really going to be like a 4-turn game. Like the game is really going to start on turn 2. Like that's really when the game is going to start in 9th. And whereas in 8th, it was really about who got that first turn, who was able to bring in, who's able to pick up that big unit of yours first. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to kind of have these closer games. And I think mostly I'm excited to have just the unified mission set. Like, obviously I've played in Adepticon, Nova. I played at I played ETC style games, WTC style games. I played ITC games. I played chapter approved at many events, and I played custom rules like missions where there's totally custom missions. So playing a unified rule set, I think, is actually going to be really exciting because we're going to see the meta kind of like, kind of even out a bit.
Yeah.
Whereas before you had these like certain mission sets where like certain lists were much better and certain lists were much worse.
Right.
And now I think GW is actually going to have a much better ability to balance the game because like, a lot of times coming out of LVO or Adepticon, they would drop their FAQ and they would do maybe a balance pass, but those weren't necessarily indicative of like how people in the UK were playing it, like the games were Trapeze, or how people were playing narrative games, because the mission sets were so different that certain things are favored over others.
Right.
And now, hopefully, with that unified set, I think we're going to be able to see a much easier time balancing, and you're not going to see certain skew lists kind of take over depending on the missions.
Right. Is there anything obvious that you see that is like can be broken? Anything that sticks out?
Like as far as the missions, or as far as the rule set in general?
I guess armies and army builds that they would need to FAQ, kind of things that slip that they didn't intend but could be exploited. Anything that sticks out?
I mean, it's hard to say until we see the points. Like, I think obviously I think some of the Space Marine points have leaked, but even that we don't even know if those are actually final. They're like playtest points basically. So even those could see changes in the final copy. And I think ultimately, it'll be interesting to see what's contained in the 9th edition, that grand tournament book, because we could get a whole new set of match play missions that are different than the rulebook missions. And those might become the de facto tournament missions. So from a competitive standpoint, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
I do think they definitely need to be careful because a lot of the existing books, like Custodes, like Grey Knights, were kind of balanced around the fact that they didn't get that many command points.
Right.
And so if they kind of erase that disadvantage, but kind of keep everything else the same, I think there's going to be a much, like Custodes have some amazing stratagems, but it was like based around the fact, and a lot of them are quite cheap for what they do compared, if you compare them to say other books. Same with Grey Knights and same with like some of these very elite armies. So I think if they take that, they're balanced around the fact that these armies are not going to have that many CP. So now that everyone kind of gets the same amount plus 1, so 17 per game minimum, I'm hoping that they take that into account when they do the balancing, because if not, especially with the way that, like, so if you think about like the 8th was a Horde edition, and this is going to be an MSE edition. So we got blast rules, we got the new coherency rules, we got the kind of all the weird rules with like charging and multi charges. So I think hordes have kind of been hit in like multiple areas, and so I could really see the shift going to MSU, going to these elite armies, and because we're still using 8th edition books, I think there's a danger there that unless they update those books quite quickly, or unless the points compensate for that, which again we don't know yet because we haven't seen that.
Right.
There's a danger that some of those elite armies that were kind of balanced around being elite, not having that many CP, but like could end up kind of catapulting to the top until their books are rewritten, or until they get. I don't know if we're going to get a chapter approved this year. I can't imagine they're going to do another points update in 6 months. That seems a little bit weird, but I also don't know if July was actually when they were planning to release 9th edition, because from what it sounds like, they had planned to announce it at Adepticon, and that never happened.
Right.
So that would have been a very long. Adepticon's in March, I believe. So it would have been March, April, May, June, July. So that would have been a 5-month announcement. That seems too long, because I think most of the editions were usually around 30 to 60 days, like announced before they launched.
Yeah.
So, maybe these like the GT book and the points updates were actually like meant to be launched earlier in the year, in which case they would still do a chapter approved, but it would be weird if they dropped like another chapter approved in 6 months, considering the fact that the lead times on these books are 6 months. So chapter approved is probably going to the printers like right now, right? So it's probably. Like, and they haven't even released the first points update. So how would they be able to do another round of points updates for chapter approved? So it just doesn't make sense. So I'm really interested to see kind of what they do for the end of the year.
Yeah, it's a very curious thing in the world and the state that it's in, and how they've adjusted to it, and what they're doing for it. I think ultimately it's good because it's fun and it's new and it's exciting, and that's how I like to look at it.
Yeah, and I actually think obviously with the Psychic Awakening, so I think the first book dropped. It was Blood of the Phoenix. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
I think that was in like September last year.
Right.
And Pariah had just dropped, so that's about a 9-month like gap between the books.
Right.
And imagine there was no Rona, and we're all playing events for the last 9 months. Then you're going to see the meta just do this and this, right? Because as every book releases, one faction goes up, factions come down, factions go up, factions come down. And I actually think it was like, obviously this sucks that we haven't been able to play, but from a gameplay perspective, them being able to get out all those books with no one really playing, and then now we're kind of starting fresh. Everyone kind of at the same place. Everyone's got their Psychic Awakening. Everyone's got like the new rules. Everyone's going to get new points. It's kind of nice that we all get to kind of start off with a fresh foot, and we don't have to kind of like, we didn't have to go through like 8 months of like seesawing meta changes and imbalances and stuff like that. Like, obviously I wish none of this happened because it's a horrible situation. Yeah, so I'm excited about that.
It's like a byproduct of what has happened.
Yeah. And I've gotten so much hobbying done, so I'm painting, so I've been super productive, and it's been great.
Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna grab a question here. So Don Husin says, Jim Vesal, I challenge you to a duel, sir.
I accept your duel.
Do you know Don? Is it just?
I know Don.
Okay, what's he saying now is a very interesting take. Good observation, says Confucidius. Hot take: tournament players have ruined 40K. Oh, okay, that's a can of worms. How so? How so? I'm curious. Yeah. It's a completely different aspect of the hobby. I don't know if I think it's just what exists.
I guess the question would be like, ruin it for who? Because I mean, they haven't ruined it for themselves, right? So
right. Yeah.
And the great thing about tournaments is you don't have to play in them. So you can play narrative or open play or any of the. I think that my favorite thing with Games Workshop the last 6 years is the 3 ways to play. I think that's such a great way to kind of present the hobby and present the game, and that there's different aspects of the game that you can enjoy, and there's a bit of something for everyone. And I think I've never been a huge fan of people kind of imposing their kind of play style on others. Like I know Dave, like you're really big in narrative, and I think that's awesome. And like I wish I had more friends that in my group that were into that, because then I'd have like people to play with, right? that more narrative and that people would be interested in that. And, that's just not our play style, but I think it's really great that, you can get out of the hobby what you want.
Yeah.
I can get what I want. And then there's areas that there's crossover and we share the hobby and the love of the hobby together.
Yeah.
And then there's, I think that's such a great thing. And so, I do think it's a hot take. I think it's a bad take, but yeah. So.
All right. Can Jim, this is from Keith Togeman. He says, can Jim give us his thoughts on each demon engine and its use in 9th edition for Chaos Space Marines? Points notwithstanding, of course.
Sure. I'll try to be quick with this because obviously there's quite a few. I think the biggest winners out of the specific demon engines are going to be things like, and I'm specifically talking about Chaos Space Marines. I really love Defilers. I've had an unnatural and unrational love of Defilers ever since the original Dawn of War video game came out, and I used to play Chaos Space Marines in that and just literally build like 30 Defilers and just like blow everything up. And so since that game, this is like, I don't know how long it's been since that game came out. And I played Warhammer before that, so It's not like that got me into Warhammer, but I remember buying that game and Defilers were so cool in it. They were so awesome. You could just shoot battle cannons from the back of your lines. And so I've always had this like weird irrational love of Defilers.
Hey, that's a good life choice. I agree with this life choice, Jim.
Yeah, so I love Defilers, and my only complaint about the Defiler is I wish there was a base size or a base for it because it's such a weird shaped model, and especially with like the terrain rules, a lot of them requiring things like seeing through bases and stuff like that. It gets a bit cumbersome. So I actually I'm planning to do three Defilers for my Chaos Space Marines or my Death Guard. I think I'm not sure which ones, but I really like them because they can now move in. They can do kind of what they're great at, which is move and fire up the field, shoot their battle cannons. They have all these different attacks. I think they're going to be. I think they're the big winners, especially if their points stay fairly similar. Like right now, I think a Defiler with like a Scourge and an autocannon is like 144 points. Like it's dirt cheap. So 3 of those for like less than like 450 points. And they're very tough. They heal, all this kind of stuff. So I think they're awesome. I think the Forge Fiends and the Mauler Fiends, I think those will really depend on the points. They're just barely competitive. I think like they were just underneath being like competitive, but I think they're awesome models, and I really hope again they're going to benefit immensely from those rules, especially if you can throw a Lord Discordant in there to give them all +1 to hit. I think that's going to be really strong as well. So I'm excited to run 3 Defilers and a Lord Discordant in like a little like kind of crab spider army. So I'm excited to do that. And then I think, we'll see what happens with Helldrakes. They've kind of been in like the corner being punished ever since like 6th and 7th edition when they're like OP. And they've kind of been like nerfed and kind of been told like, okay, you need to sit out an edition or two because you guys were too good at just terrorizing all the tables. So I'm interested to see kind of what happens with those. But again, they're going to benefit from a lot of the rules, like the being able to fire into combat, being able to move without penalty, because the demon engines all have they're all BS4. So in the past, like if you move them, which you wanted to because they could fight, they're all hitting on 5s. And then with the penalties to hit, they're hitting on 6s. Yeah. Like, so if you shoot anything, they're hitting on 6s. And now they're never hitting worse than a 5, even if something has -1 to hit. Right. So I think they're gonna benefit the most. So I'm really excited to play those demon engines. I think that's what makes Chaos Space Marines really differentiates them from Space Marines. Is those demon engines. And I think right now, like you hear a lot of Chaos players complaining that like Chaos Space Marines get everything but better. But like if our demon engines really come into their own, I think that's going to be like the really cool differentiating factor for Chaos Space Marines. So I'm excited to see the points. Like that's the thing I'm waiting on right now, because that's when like all the scheming starts to happen and all the gears start to turn. And I'm trying to clear my paint table right now so that as soon as the points drop, I can like go buy out whatever I need to and start painting.
So would you do that be your loadout? You'd be Reaper autocannon, battle cannon, of course, and a power scourge. Would you?
I've always liked to keep them cheap.
Okay. You would a combi flamer? You would put a combi flamer on them?
Yeah. Again, I don't know what the points are. I guess I like the Reaper. I think they come with a Storm Bolter that you can replace, or a Combi Bolter, sorry, that you can give them. I like the Reaper autocannon because it gives them a little bit of extra shooting. Yeah. And it's always been cheaper than the Flamer option, from what I recall. But I definitely like the Scourge because it juices up their attacks quite a bit, and they're pretty nasty with like they have like 4 or 5 attacks base, and then they have another 3 or 4 attacks from the Scourge. Like they can pick up vehicles really quickly in combat, especially with Demon Forge for 1 CP, getting full rerolls, hits, and wound.
Yeah,
like
that's
it's gross.
Huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
Plus,
so
Lord Discord nearby too.
my one wish is that they got Legion traits. Like I really hope.
Yeah.
My big disappointment with the Chaos Space Marine quote unquote rewrite was none of them got Legion traits, and I think like not to say that they would benefit because most of the Chaos Space Marine Legion traits aren't great, but being able to ignore cover as a defiler if you're in Iron Warriors, or like being able to be -1. I mean, obviously the Word Bearers one is kind of useless; they get a reroll leadership. But I actually think that's actually gotten so much better in the new edition because you can't use CP for morale anymore, right? And Insane Bravery is one use only.
Right.
So that trait, which was kind of trash before, has actually gotten a lot better. I think we're going to see a lot more benefit from an ability like that in 9th edition. So could see some more Word Bearers as well.
Why Word Bearers?
Well, for that trait is what I'm saying, because they have one of the worst traits. I think it's basically they got to just reroll their morale tests.
Oh yeah. That's like...
And now with you can't use CP to reroll morale anymore, and Insane Bravery is one use only per game.
Right.
So that reroll of morale, it could be more. It's definitely more important now.
For sure.
I think we're going to see it a little bit more, hopefully.
I like that. I actually like that a lot. How that has changed, because before it's like okay, but it could only be 1 unit anyway, right? Because it's 1 stratagem per phase anyway. Before, but now you could do it multiple times, or before you could do it multiple times. But I suppose if it's only once per game, it's like okay, this is the unit that has to not fail.
Well, yeah, and I think I think the whole command roll change is such a huge change. Like if you look at something like Vect, or some of those really like look at something like the Gilliman's Get Back Up or a Knight Get Back Up. The going from 1 in 6 chance to 1 in 36 really skewed the math before. So like before, to fail Vect, it's 1 in 6. But with the CP roll is 1 in 36, right? So now it's back to 1 in 6. So like the odds change, like going from 1 in 36 to 1 in 6. That's like a huge change in the odds of success. Yeah. And we're going to see a lot of things like that where the odds of success are definitely changed. So.
I like how they've clearly defined the things that you can re-roll. That's a nice thing too. It's pretty clear. It's easy. There's no room for argument. You got to wonder how they came up with that. What if it's just a ton of feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I think I read the article. I can't remember where I was reading, but basically, I think a lot of those strats, those like 4+ to get back up, 3+, to do something really strong, were really balanced around the fact that like you had that one chance to do it, and now you can't do that anymore. So, I think like those, to use that strat, it's less of a no-brainer. Because with a reroll before, you're like, okay, the odds of it happening are very good, so it was almost like always worth it to do it. But now it's like, okay, well, do I really want to spend that 2 CP or 3 CP to get back up on my Knight if there's a 50% chance it doesn't actually work?
Right. So here's a question from Anthony Breed. He says, how has 9th edition affected the battle tactics when the new stipulation doesn't allow a stat to be greater or negative beyond 1?
Well, I think it definitely changes a lot of lists. I think like things like the -4 to hit Lord Discordant are gone. Alatok, I think we're going to see that kind of shift away. Like Eldar, everyone played Alatok. I don't even know if that's how you say it, because that's how that was just such a good thing. And now even like Alpha Legion was such a dominant, it was like basically the best Chaos Space Marine. And now it's like, I think if people have minuses, like you're going to move your heavy weapon foot troops more because you don't care. Like you kind of negates that.
Right.
And I think it really, not being able to hit something is like such a feel bad, or hitting on 6s is such a feel bad like mechanic. So I actually really like it that they've capped it. I just hope that they rebalance some of those like those units or tactics around the fact that like they're going to be a lot easier to kill. I think this edition things are going to die a lot more because there's going to be much less minuses to hit, vehicle shooting into combat, no more tri-pointing. Like shooting is really going to kind of jack up a lot of units. So I think definitely we're going to see a lot more units die pretty quick. So that was one of the biggest survival mechanics was minuses to hit, especially things like lightning fast reflexes.
What are your thoughts on the changes to morale and how that works now?
I think the biggest thing is I like it. It kind of feels like in certain situations a lot better, and in certain situations a lot worse. So I think for certain things like cultists before, like if you had 30 cultists and someone killed 10 of them, you're gonna lose another like 15 cultists basically.
Yeah.
And now, or like so their leadership 6 usually, so you're gonna lose like 8 to 9 more cultists maybe, and now you might only lose like 3. So I think for those larger units, it's nice. And I think for the smaller units, it hasn't really changed. So for Marines, if you kill say 2 Marines out of a squad of 10, and you fail you fail your test, you roll like a 6 and then another 6, for instance, because they shall know no fear.
Yeah.
You're going to lose probably a minimum of 2 models. Well, you lose the 1 automatic, and then you roll again for the rest of the unit, 7 more dice.
That's right.
You lose like 2 models. So, and maybe more if you have bad rolls. So I think for certain elites, we're going to see, like I think for mid-level units, it makes it a bit more effective. For larger units, it makes it less impactful.
Effective.
And then for small units, it almost doesn't change at all, because when you had like 5-man units, basically they were basically immune to morale anyways. So
yeah, that's what we have found with our games. That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
The bigger units, they stay more. The smaller units, they go more. And it's almost like it's a better balancing. It's interesting. I'm liking it so far. I haven't found that it's I dislike it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that was a nice change.
And I think the biggest, it was a little bit of a weird change for me, because they're like, hey, we want to reduce so many dice rolls, so we're going to make Overwatch 1 time only, but then we're going to make morale like, okay, now you got to roll dice for every model. Like it was almost like, did you guys just say you want to have less dice rolls, and now you guys have double the amount of dice rolls for morale? So it'll be interesting, and I'm really hoping that out of that emerges a bit more, like it kind of devalues some of the leadership debuffs, because like before, the more you debuff leadership, the more models they would lose.
More you would lose, yeah.
And now it's like you just want to debuff them enough to fail the test.
Yeah. And
then anything past that is kind of wasted. So you don't need like -6, -7 leadership. It's just -2 or -3 is enough to get them to fail that initial test, and then the job is done. Whereas before you tried to stack like -7, -8. In some cases it's possible, especially with chaos like Night Lords and some of the other like units. You could definitely do that kind of stuff. So
yeah. Crush on Land Raiders too. So what are your thoughts on Land Raiders?
Man, I remember when the new plastic, like the current plastic Land Raider came out. So I started playing like 40K again in 8th, but I actually played 3rd edition 40K, and the plastic Land Raider as it currently is came out in 3rd edition.
Okay.
And I remember buying a Chaos Space Marine Land Raider, and I had the White Dwarf had the poster. Like there's like a Land Raider, like basically like schematics, and I had that up in my room because I was like, this is the coolest model. And the Chaos Land Raider was like my first big like Chaos tank. So I've always loved the Land Raider. I've always thought it was like such a cool model, like such a cool history. It's such an iconic 40K vehicle. I'm really hoping that it sees kind of its like it kind of comes back, because I always thought like they were great in like earlier editions, especially with like when they're armor 14 all around, and you could like you just mow them up the field, las cannons, just gunning everything down. So I'm really hoping they've kind of faded away in the coolness because they don't have hover technology or like Primaris jank. But I'm really hoping that they get enough of a points drop that they see see a bit of a reemergence. I would love it if they got some sort of assault rule, like almost like the Impulsor does, where you could move and then, because they have that assault ramp. So like for me, it's like the whole point of the assault ramp is like they could assault. So it'd be really cool if they had a rule where it was like you can move the Land Raider, then disembark. That would instantly change. Instantly, right? Yeah. So like
Berserkers all day long.
Like seeing something like that, or even if they could move, disembark, maybe they have a similar rule to the Impulsor where maybe you can't shoot or maybe you can't assault. but you can shoot, or maybe you can't shoot, but you can assault. One or the other.
Right.
Something where it just becomes this kind of unique, iconic thing that has a very cool ability. Like that would instantly make it like such a. I think we'd see them again, and that'd be really exciting.
Yeah.
It's such a iconic like 40K model. It's like for me, if I had to pick between the Leman Russ and the Land Raiders, like the iconic 40K tank, Land Raider all the way.
Yeah, that would win for sure. Fat Droid 13 asks, so am I reading the rules wrong, or are Red Corsairs able to start the game with around 17 CP on turn 1?
Well, I think it's kind of hard to make those claims. Like they've said they're going to be day 1 FAQs for all the books. They've already shown how things like the Knight. So if you looked at the Knight Warhammer community page, they already showed how they've changed how like they showed the essentially the FAQ for Knights, how they've essentially errated it for how CP is generated. So I would imagine Red Corsairs are going to get a similar errata. So I wouldn't go too crazy thinking, that's what I'm saying. Like you can't really like go too far with list building, and even the games that people are playing right now with like 8th edition, essentially 8th edition books and rules, but with 9th edition rule book.
Yeah.
They're not quite the same because we could see all sorts of changes in that day 1 FAQ, especially points, but there could be all sorts of other changes with like army composition. Like Red Corsairs is a really interesting one, but if it does become the case that Red Corsairs do get some sort of benefit where they're going to be able to generate extra CP, because right now, like say if you took a battalion of Red Corsairs with your Warlord in it, it would be free, but everyone gets that. Yeah. So maybe you get 3 command points for doing that. I think all of a sudden you're going to see a lot more Red Corsairs. So, I could see some sort of situation where they actually generate extra CP. And if that's the case, what that allows is you can take like a Red Corsairs battalion and then take another battalion for essentially free because they kind of cancel out, which I think could be really, really powerful as well. So I'm interested to see kind of how the FAQ kind of shakes out. And as I said, like there's a lot of theory hammer going on. There's a lot of like people trying to, it's a bit frustrating, especially someone that plays competitively, seeing all the kind of dishonest actors and kind of dishonest takes on the rules right now. People are trying to break the rules. The edition isn't even out. Like it's not out for another 2 weeks. And there's a lot of like kind of like those kinds of players that they're trying to kind of read the rules in a way that's like the most like like the worst take. Like how can I read this rule so it's like the worst interpretation of it for the most advantage, right, that anyone with any common sense or any sort of like any TO or any like even just event person would be like, no, that's absolutely not how it works. You're just you're reading it. So I've been seeing a lot of that right now in some of the competitive circles, and it's really frustrating because a lot of those things we know that they're not going to last, and they're not intuitive, they don't make sense, and I hate that kind of those bad faith arguments. So I'm really hoping, I'm kind of hoping that we see the FAQs fairly soon. Like I'm hoping I know they said the app is going to be out on pre-order day. That's like in 4 days, and we haven't heard anything about it. So I'm a little bit skeptical if like this app even exists, because they were like, yeah, it's gonna go live with like all the rules and all the detachments on the day that the edition goes on pre-order, and they're like, we'll reveal more as it gets closer. I'm like, guys, like it's like pre-orders in 3 days. Like we haven't heard a single peep about the app, so I'm a little bit skeptical, like because I remember like 2 years ago at Adepticon, they're like, yeah, we're developing a 40K app. And I think at the time, everyone thought it was going to be for 8th edition.
Right.
And 2 years later, like every developer preview, people were like, hey, where's that app you guys talked about? And they're like, oh yeah, we're still working on it. And now they're like, oh yeah, it's going to be 9th edition. So it's almost like vaporware at this point. And they haven't shown anything except like the icon. So I'm a little bit skeptical if we get that app on this Saturday, and also if we get the FAQs on this Saturday. Because if we get all that on Saturday, I'm gonna just lock myself in my room and just like be like goobing out on this like all weekend. So
yeah, no, I'm right with you there with the hope that happens. K Zoe 1 says, as a Slaanesh player, just wanted to get the opinion on Noise Marines in 9th with their Beastmaster and the ignoring cover guns.
The Blastmaster, I think it's the Blastmaster. So it's kind of weird. So like one of the big things, especially if you played like say maybe ITC, where bottom floor block line of sight. One of the biggest mechanics, and I think people aren't really thinking about this as much as they should be. And I know they've mentioned a few of the ninth edition battle reports, but now in order to kind of hide behind a piece of terrain, for instance, you can't actually be in it, because as soon as you step your toe into the cover, if there's any like holes where you can draw line of sight, you can see the unit. So now you want to be actually like physically on the other side. So a lot of the terrain, you often heard in 8th edition, I'm toe in. So like my toe is just inside the cover.
Yeah.
And now it's like my toe, you're going to be toe out. So like I'm just like 0.1 outside on the other side of that terrain piece, so that because it's obscuring, assuming it is, you can't actually see through it. So, and if you're on the other side, which I think a lot of units are going to be, you're not actually getting cover. So what I think it will do is, I think a lot of people are going to try to play almost where they're on the other sides of these kinds of units, these pieces of terrain, rather than in it, which I actually don't love. Like it kind of feels counterintuitive that like units don't want to go inside the cover, because that stops the obscuring rules. Like it's kind of that's kind of what I was mentioning earlier when I was like, there's some weird things with the terrain rules which I don't know if I love. Like I kind of feel like I want them to encourage people going into terrain, and right now it actually like removes it like makes you more visible, and I'd much rather be invisible than take my cover save. Like, you know what I mean? That's much being invisible is much more protective than having a cover save. So I think there could be a lot of situations, obviously if there's objectives and stuff like that, you do what you got to do. But I think in general, ignore cover is not going to be as important, just because of the fact that things are going to be kind of on the other side of terrain, rather than in the terrain. Like unless obviously they need to go get an objective.
Right.
But I think especially early turns, people are going to be trying to kind of stay on the other side of buildings, kind of so that you can't kind of see through them. I think that's going to be like the way that you move around the table, and then when you're ready to kind of pounce, then you kind of enter the train and go for what you need to do. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. So, I mean, I'm secretly really hoping for Emperor's Children and my Fulgrim and that whole range. Like, it's coming at some point, because they did the little Noise Marine, everyone went crazy. Fabius Bile came out, everyone went crazy. I mean, those are both Emperor's Children, so I mean, who knows? Maybe they're kind of laying the breadcrumbs here, but. I'd love a Emperor's Children release. So
yeah, I would certainly like a release too for Chaos. A Khorne release, maybe a World Eaters or a Khorne Demonkin or something Khorne. I think that would be.
Yeah, I really like that
fantastic.
old Demonkin book, and
it's painful that it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, and that is like how I view Chaos. Like that's how I feel like Chaos should be played. Like you have 100%. Like cult troops and then cult demons, and like. That's like, and like machines and robots and stuff like that for me is like, when I think about Chaos, that's what I think about. So, and Khorne Demonkin really like was that embodied.
Oh yeah. You were rewarded for charging forward and killing stuff and dying. Mm-hmm. It was fantastic. That was definitely by far my favorite. Followed up by Traitor Legions, which lasted for like 10 months and then disappeared into the ether.
Yeah, I think, even like, I think, that happens at the end of every edition. Like, I remember Fantasy, they had those End Times books, and it was like, oh yeah, like buy all these like rule books, and then like 6 months later, I was like, okay, your game doesn't exist. Cool. So I mean, that's pretty typical for GW to like release a bunch of like supplements and rule books and then totally invalidate them. But I mean, it is what it is.
Have you heard rumors? Have you heard rumors floating around about Psychic Awakening, and how we just got War of the Spider, right? And Fabius Bile was like, oh, awesome, cool, movement, strength buffs. And then new edition hits, and it's like, oh wait, hold on, all invalid now. Have you heard, like, I don't know if they're legit rumors, obviously they're just rumors and people being like unnecessarily scared. Not necessarily without cause, because precedent has been set, but I just think that's curious. I don't think they're going to invalidate those. I think they'll still be good.
No, I mean they said they were all written for 9th edition. I mean, I don't know if that's exactly true, because some like the fact that they're already FAQing a lot of the stuff means that they probably weren't written for 9th edition. I think some of the later Psychic Awakening books were, and it's kind of curious. Like it was really weird. Like the whole Psychic Awakening really went out with a bit of a lame ending. Like Pariah is probably the worst. Like obviously from a story standpoint, it kind of wraps up the story.
Yeah.
But like no real rules for anyone. We got a few random characters. Yeah. Like you think like the ultimate ending to Psychic Awakening would have like the coolest, awesomest stuff, and literally it had like 5 characters in it, and I think there's like maybe assassins or something. I can't remember what's in it, but there's no real rules.
There's Inquisitor rules. And,
yeah, which I have a bunch of metal Inquisitors from third edition when the Codex Demon Hunters. I don't know if you remember the Codex Demon Hunters in third, which is super cool.
Yeah.
And I always loved the fluff how the different Ordos had like in the, I think they retconned it, but like before, like Sisters used to be like Ordo Xenos, I think, and then like Grey Knights were Ordo Malleus, and then I think the Death the Death, what are they called? Death Company? No, the Death Watch. They were Order Xenos, and then Malleus was the Grey Knights, and then Hereticus was the Sisters. Like each one had this like arm, and I love that Codex Demon Hunter. Some of the models, like the old metal Inquisitors, were so cool. So I have a bunch of those old metal acolytes and like little henchmen and stuff. I think I'm gonna like strip them and repaint them for my I have a Soul Drinkers 40k Space Marine army that I've been working on for 8 months.
Nice.
So I'm really excited to do a bunch of like cool henchmen, assassins, that kind of stuff. And then now that they don't break things like doctrines, I think we'll hopefully see them a lot more. But I always thought Inquisitors were such a cool part of the lore. And I'm hoping that they're going to see a lot more play now. My favorite books by far are still the Eisenhorn trilogy and the Ravener trilogy. Those are like, I just re-listened, to the audiobooks. I have the original paperbacks, but I bought the audiobooks from Audible.
Yeah.
And I listened to those while painting, and like to this day, still like 20 years later, they still hold up. Dan Abnett is like writes the best 40k for sure.
We have a question here from Miss Wubwub.
Mm-hmm.
What is Jim's favorite unit that he has never had competitive success with? What unit does he wish was competitive but just isn't quite there?
So, I mean, I think with 8th edition, my favorite unit, I had a Lord of, one of my first things I bought was a Lord of Change. I think they dropped the new model right at the start of 8th edition. And this is before I really understood like army building in 8th. Like I was like, Tzeentch, cool, let's buy it. So I bought a Lord of Change, and I played it a few times with my Thousand Sons, and it just always just got blown off the table like in 2 turns. So that was, and I spent so much time painting it. Like I literally, like, it's probably one of the best models I painted. Even, this is like still 3 years later. It's still, I put like probably like 70, 80 hours into it. Painted like each little feather, like you could see each little striation on the feathers. Spent so long on it, like was so proud of it when it was finished. And I played it in 1 or 2 games ever competitively. Because it would just always die. So with the new Exalted Demon rules, I was excited, but then they're like, oh yeah, by the way, you can't soup now, so not as excited. So I'm like, okay, well, how do I fit this in a list? And that was actually one of the things that I actually I'm excited to play Word Bearers, is because I think a good way to be able to bring demons in is to summon them, so you can kind of get around a lot of the detachment rules. And I think Word Bearers have the best summoning, so being able to kind of put in a Word Bearers patrol and then summon in demons through the Word Bearers, I think that's going to be actually a really cool angle that I want to kind of explore a little bit.
Interesting.
Now that like it's not as easy to add a bunch of demons to your list.
Right. But you could do that and it's still kosher.
For sure.
So Confucidius.
Order Hericus.
They say, okay, so here's a question from YouTube. Last edition was very shooty. Do you think this edition will be more or less shooty?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's gonna be more shooty.
More shooty.
Yeah, like I think it'll be shooty. It's not gonna be as alpha strike shooty. So I think there's gonna be more opportunities to not get shot off turn 1.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think shooting is gonna be the dominant method, especially given all the like close combat. I know I think they're trying to say like, oh, it's close combat edition, but the changes to fallback, the changes to like being able to like not tri-point, basically, the changes to coherency, the changes to charging where you can't multi-charge, you have to hit every target.
Yeah.
That's really gonna like one of the biggest strategies in 8th was taking a unit, let's say 10 Berserkers, charging 2 or 3 things, hitting one, fighting again, killing the other. Now that's like so hard because you got to keep them really tight.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to get to multiple targets. If you fail one of them, you fail both.
Yeah.
Also things like the command reroll, not being able to reroll one of the dice, you got to reroll both, means coming out of deep strike charging out of deep strike is actually going to be a lot harder, because previously, you'd roll that 2d6, and as long as one was like a 4 or 5, you had a pretty good chance of rerolling the other one and getting that like 9+.
Yeah.
But now it's like because you have to reroll both, you're trying to get a 9 on a straight die roll.
Yeah.
And that's definitely like a lot harder than if you could reroll 1 dice.
Yeah.
So now obviously there's times where you'd roll like snake eyes. So I think someone did the math, and it actually isn't that much different statistically. I think for 2d6 charges, you end up in a situation where like to make like a 9-inch charge, isn't that much difference, but it is enough of a difference. So I definitely think it's gonna be a shooting edition, especially things, but we'll see, right? Like, if they point shooting units very expensive and combat units much cheaper, then we could see a situation where, yeah, shooting is more powerful, but there's more combat units in the game. Ultimately, though, I think every edition the key is to have a kind of a mixed force. So some elements of shooting, some like I think you're going to see 60%, 70% shooting. Everything in 40K has a gun, so it's always going to be a shooting game. There's very few units that don't have at least like a gun or a grenade. But I definitely could see. I still think you want some close combat elements, especially if you need to kind of, to play a balanced list.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like shooting, especially being able to outflank stuff and kind of pop up and blow things away from the board edge. I think that's going to definitely be, the strength of this edition.
Do you agree with people saying that the 9th edition has become a Gunline Castle edition?
No, and the reason I don't is because if you look at the mission set, almost all of them require you being in the middle of the board. So, if you look at an ITC mission set, one of the biggest things was you had kill secondaries. So you could sit there, you could get Reaper, you could get there's basically secondary missions that were based around killing, and then the primary objective was kill one, kill more. So just based on the secondary missions of killing, and then the primary missions of kill one, kill more, you could basically just hold one objective in your deployment zone and get hold one. So in the tournament setting, you could basically create that castle, not move much, and rack up points throughout the game and still win the game. In this edition, you need to be in the middle of the board. There's no killing secondaries whatsoever. So none of the secondaries are based on killing stuff, which means it's really about getting places, holding things, activating, doing actions on objectives, surviving.
Yeah.
And I think if you want to sit in your deployment zone, great. I'm going to take the middle of the board. I'm going to hold objectives. I'm going to put my flag down. I'm going to cast my psychic powers, get my points, and you can blow away my whole army. But if by turn 3 I've done all that, I've racked up a bunch of points, and now say turn 4, turn 5, you're starting to move up, it's too late for you. So I definitely don't think it's going to be a castle edition. I think mobile shooting is going to be very good. So things like vehicles, I think we're going to see a lot of things like dreadnoughts, things like, I think obviously Eldar vehicles with like their speed are going to still be very good. I think things like, especially things that can like scout and deny deep strike are going to be very good.
Yeah.
Fly is still very good. People are like, oh, fly is useless. Fly is still very good. The speed and the fact that you can jump over terrain, that's incredible. Like, and you can jump back behind things. Like, fly is still an incredible keyword. I think it was too good before. So I definitely think this is going to be an addition of MSU, mobile, like gun platforms, and then resilience, like holding things, being able to stay alive. You can't just go throw 10 cultists on an objective and just because now points are scored at the start of your turn.
Yeah.
So they have to survive a whole turn on that objective.
That's right.
And if you have 10 cultists there, guess where your opponent's going to shoot? They're going to shoot those 10 cultists. So I definitely feel like it'll still be a shooting heavy edition, but not a castle edition. I think mobile shooting, things like Tau are going to be really strong. AdMech, like especially with all the updates like on Psychic Awakening, I think they're going to be very good lists.
So we got a comment here from Vigo the Carpathian. I'm a Night Lords player who uses Marines and Raptors as the base of my army. Am I doomed to mediocrity in 9th like I was to 8th?
So, again, it's hard to say. I think actually like things like Raptors being able to kind of natural deep strike, especially with the if you can do the Vigilus formation, which is still valid. I forget what it's called. The host raptorial, so lets them get extra movement out of deep strike, lets them get extra stratagems out of deep strike. I think that's actually more powerful now because remember, charging out of deep strike is a lot harder now. So you don't because you don't get to reroll one a dice. So getting +2 out of your deep strike charge, I think is really strong. Things like being able to hold things. So they have a stratagem where you can hold things in combat. So with the ability where you can't tri-point anymore, any sort of ability that prevents fallback got a lot stronger as well, right? So I actually think they're going to have a lot more play, and I definitely feel like if the points are right, if the points are balanced correctly, I definitely think Chaos Space Marines are going to be very strong. It's just not going to be a situation of like, where, and then the leadership debuffs as well. I think you're going to be able to set up certain plays with those where you're able to kind of maximize those leadership debuffs a lot better. So I have hope. And they got a great update in Vigilus as well, Faith and Fury. With they got some great stratagems. You can create some really gross killy demon princes with some of their relics and stuff. And they got a lot of pluses to hit. So I think Night Lords are going to have some play, especially if you want to just even do like a patrol of them to bring in those raptors, those flying units. And now you'll be able to have things like demon engines come up with them, move up with them, and kind of stay with the army. So I think we're going to see a lot of different builds kind of emerge from the top. So
we got a clarification here, Jim. Somebody says, "What does he mean? No killing secondaries?" Could you re-explain that just really quick?
Sorry, there are killing secondaries. I meant killing primaries. Sorry, I meant to say that.
Okay.
Most of the primaries are not killing.
I'm really excited about the decreased board sizes too because of all this. I think movement is going to play a huge role. I agree. I like the board sizes because that just means Berserkers have they're closer to the enemy because there's less room for the enemy to move. That's what I think. That's my filter. How does it benefit Berserkers? That's what I think about all rules.
Yeah, I have a unit of 10 Berserkers that I converted from Stormcast Eternals that are like probably one of my favorite.
From Stormcast, you mean the Warriors?
No, from Stormcast.
From Stormcast.
I'll have to send you a photo of them, but
yeah, please do.
They're on my Instagram actually, Jimbo V_paints. But I converted them from Stormcast and then some Blood Warrior parts and then Khorne Berserker parts. They're like probably one of my favorite units that I've converted.
Okay.
And I've used them like twice.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to kind of get them back on the table because I think Berserkers, I think 5-man units of Berserkers are going to be a thing now. Kind of almost like suicide missiles, like throw them in. Yeah. Like this kind of, blood for the blood god. He doesn't care where the blood flows. So if they die, fantastic. They've died for Khorne, and their skulls will get added to the pile. So I'm excited to use those, and I think they're going to be good in all Chaos Space Marine lists. Like I think having and like I have a Rhino. I'm excited to use a Rhino again. Like I think they're gonna, I think transports are going to be really big because, like being able to hide models behind transports and being able to hold objectives with transports in the middle of the board, like tough. And no one wants to shoot a Rhino.
No.
It's like, okay, it's like, I don't want to, and they're not obviously super hard to kill, but like, they're not easy. Like you have to put a decent amount of anti-tank. And so if you have like, say, Berserkers and a Rhino on an objective, it's going to be hard for players to kill both.
Right.
So,
what they want to kill, what they want to kill less than a Rhino is a drop pod.
Yeah.
I actually tried that yesterday because I played with my Blood Angels and I brought 3 drop pods. I haven't brought them since 7th edition and I just want to try it, right? I'm like, okay, I'm going to bring these in. I'm going to choose Line Breaker as one of my secondaries and try to do something going in his back lines. And if not, I'll just go on the objectives. Either case is kind of, it's a good use of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish Chaos got drop pods. I mean, I know we get the crazy Forge World one, but like...
No, like a drop pod proper. Like our own... Heck, a Demon Engine drop pod would be amazing.
Yeah. That would be really cool.
Just this massive mouth.
What do you... have you seen the last few rumor engines? There was one that was like a kind of Chaos Power Fist, and like the last one was like a Chaos, like a Nurgle-looking wing. Do you think we're going to get another Chaos release here in the next few months? Like, what are your kind of thoughts? Because I kind of feel like there's something coming. I'm just like, but I feel like Chaos got so much this year, and I can't see them doing a Death Guard release. Death Guard has one of the biggest, coolest ranges. Like, I have 25 Plague Marines, and each one is a different sculpt. Like, it's insane.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I did not see that rumor engine one, but you describing it to me makes me happy.
Yeah, there was one that was like literally like I don't know if you remember the old 3rd edition Power Fist with like the kind of like pointed claws.
Yeah.
There's literally like that was like the rumor engine. And then the one that they just showed was like it looked like it had like the classic chaos tubes with like the kind of ribbing, and then it was like very kind of tattered. It looked like the wings of like a plastic Nurgle demon prince. Like if I had to guess, that's what I would guess it as.
Okay, so it's
And
something that size then. It wasn't a chaos rate. It wasn't
well,
chaos
I mean,
rate
it's
size.
always hard to tell how zoom these are,
Okay.
but I'm really hoping that
Demon
and
Primarch.
yeah, it's got like pustules on the wings, right? So it's like oh, it's Nurgle something, but like what could it be? Because I just I can't
Nurgle.
imagine them doing. Yeah, it's got like pustules on the wings. Like it looks Nurgle,
Okay.
and the claw that they showed also looked Nurgle.
Interesting.
So I'm like, what could they be releasing for Death Guard?
Typhus.
Because
Maybe it's a new
well,
typhus.
they have a plastic typhus.
Like a new, like a newer, like a newer,
Newer. Um,
because it's
what's
not.
I mean, when I think about the characters that still haven't been updated, we got not Fabius. What's his name? Lucius.
Oh, the
He's
eternal.
the,
Yeah.
he's like basically the only fine cast chaos character now, and everything else has been redone right at this point. And Harkin. Sorry, not sorry Harkin. Huron.
Blackheart.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah. So I just converted up. A project I'm working on is I want to do like the whole suite of chaos characters.
Yeah.
So I have a Huron that I scratch built from Abaddon.
Right.
And I just finished scratch building a Lucius that I finished painting.
Like
and now,
Abaddon sized Huron? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like
Oh,
yeah.
cool.
Check out my Instagram; it's on there. But I was really happy with how he turned out because I want an extra Abaddon. I already have an Abaddon.
Yeah.
And now I just have to paint up Cypher, I think, and then I have like the whole kind of. I don't know if you remember that old like Chaos box with like all the different like metal. It was like Abaddon and like Fabius and like
Yes.
Karn. It was like all the different Chaos characters in like one box.
Very old.
But basically, I've tried to like recreate that in plastic.
Yeah.
And so I just have a Cypher to paint, and then I'll have like kind of this whole like kind of like pantheon of like all the cool Chaos Lords. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, that would be sweet. I don't know. The guess it's interesting because as much as it most likely is a Nurgle thing, could it not pass for just a straight up chaos thing because of the
Oh, for sure.
mutations and growth and whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I don't think it's necessarily Death Guard. It could just be like a Nurgle thing, or it could just be a chaos thing. Anytime I see pustules, I'm usually Nurgle, but I'm just curious. It could even be like a Blackstone Fortress thing. Like
True.
They've been teased like a lot of those remergence ended up being Blackstone Fortress, and I know like they teased like the ogre or the ogren. I really hope they expanded those range because I'd love a Trader Guard book. That'd be so awesome.
Could be a new Demon Prince model.
Yeah, I actually have the old 3rd edition metal one, and that's my favorite. That's such a cool Demon Prince. The current one is a little bit goofy looking. He's very cartoony.
He's definitely absolutely. I agree with that. He's more.
He reminds me kind of like the typical like cartoon villain. Like he's got this kind of like evil grin and like holding up his hands, like he's thinking about like what he wants to do. So
yeah, I'm on that note. I'm really liking the new models. I'm liking the scale and the proportions that they're creating the new models. I think that they're a little bit more breakable, whereas like some of the older ones, it's like okay, whatever. It's if it tips over, it's not going to break. Now there's a lot of little spindly parts, but it looks a lot better. The aesthetic is there, and it looks amazing. But the new Fabius Bile, it's awesome.
Have you picked up the new Fabius?
Yeah, I have them.
Yeah, I just finished painting them like last week. It was like the one of the last models I finished painting. And literally, I remember like trying to clip him out, and I'm like, "Please God, don't break!" Like, just like trying to be so careful because like the Shirujian, his little like backpack thing has like the smallest little like connections. Oh, that's awesome.
There's no light.
Yeah, it's hard to see, but that's cool.
So even just clipping them out, you're saying, even just clipping them out, you're like, oh,
yeah,
please don't break.
I was like nervous because sometimes you clip something and it like snaps. So I was being extra careful with how I clipped it. And yeah, the technology, like, I'm kind of mixed on it because I really enjoyed the multi-part kits where you kind of do all sorts of stuff with them. But obviously that limits limits how much they can do creatively with the model as well, because you got to kind of have an arm that kind of fits in multiple ways and a leg that goes in a certain way. And
yeah.
But I look at the things like the Death Guard range. And, I think, as I said, there's like 25 different models. If they could do that for like every range where there's like 25 kind of bespoke models, that'd be really cool. And you can still do a lot of conversions, but yeah, the model, I mean, I'm sure you've probably been playing for longer than me, but the Games Workshop makes the best models in the industry, hands down.
I
And
agree. I agree with that.
how far they've come,
Yeah, I agree with that.
the technology is amazing. Like, and it's I think the funny thing for me is always like I remember when like plastic kits first started kind of becoming very popular. People are always like, oh, like plastic kits cost like hundreds of thousands of pounds. That's why they don't make them. Like the molds cost like millions of British pounds, etc. And now they're like literally making plastic like one-off kits that like they sell like they give away for free. So I'm like, it can't be. They must have gotten like very efficient at like making plastic molds and being able to do plastic at this point, because it seems like everything like even like little clown pack characters, like nothing is not plastic anymore.
Right.
So it can't be that expensive relative to like to make a plastic model these days. So it's kind of weird when you see things like any sort of fine cast still come out, or I think some of the Forge World models that they sculpted were fine cast, and I'm just like, what are you guys doing? What is it in plastic? So.
All right, so we'll do this as a last question here.
Sure.
So this is coming from Twitch. How rough is it going to be for Tyranids? The new blast and coherency rules feel pretty rough.
I mean, so I don't think it's going to be rough. So if you think about it, they've gotten buffed in some areas and hurt in some areas. So their monsters, all of their monsters are going to benefit from being able to shoot in combat, being able to move and fire their heavy weapons without penalty, being able to fight up floors, which they weren't able to do before. So things like Carnifexes, Hive Tyrants, like all those big Tyranid cool monsters are going to be a lot better. Obviously, you're not going to see armies with like 200 Gaunts. And I think what I would, and I think the nice thing with Tyranids is you can do like, they're basically still immune to morale. So you can still do large units or tons of small units, right? Like you can do like 6 10-man units of Gaunts or 6 15-man units. So I think definitely like, yeah, I think everyone kind of wins some and lose some. I think overall Tyranids I think you're going to just see a lot of different styles of armies, because the traditional Tyranid army is 40 Gene Stealers, it's like 30 Gaunts, whatever the minimum troop is, and then you got like casters and then like a Hive Tyrant maybe, and some other things like a Hive Guard in the back shooting, right? Now I think you're going to see a lot more of the monsters, which, to be honest, like if you're playing Tyranids, you don't want to play because Gaunts are cool. You want to play because Lictors are cool and Carnifexes are cool and like Exocrines are cool and Hive Tyrants are cool. Like that's why you play Tyranids, because they have they're like alien monsters, not because of like these little like tiny guys.
Yeah.
Although it's always funny reading the fluff, because I can't remember what book it was. I remember reading like a 40K short story, and it's about these guardsmen in like the bushes basically, and they keep getting killed, all the guardsmen, as they're going through the jungle. And I'm like, oh, it must be like a Lictor or Hive Tyrant killing them all, and it ends up being like a single like Hormigaunt that just like wipes out the whole squad. Like in the fluff, it's like they're so scary, but like in the tabletop, you're like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Jim.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me on. So
thank you.
We didn't get to talk that much competitive, but that's fine. I'm happy to talk hobby and fluff and goob about Hormigaunts. So. Is
there actually, before we go, is there any last thoughts that you have on just competitive stuff in general? If because the majority of the mini wargaming audience is not competitive.
Yeah.
If there's anything you would want to say to them about competitive, maybe some stigmas, preconceived ideas to quell, or
sure.
Just final thoughts.
Yeah, I think the two things that I'm most excited about for this edition. The first is the unified mission set. So a lot of the kind of stigma around competitive play has been like, oh, ITC missions, Nova missions, Adepticon missions. Like people are thinking like that's a different game. And so you had this kind of divide between maybe people that were playing kind of ITC and then the rest of the like kind of more casual population, which didn't like that kind of missions. They didn't want to play those kinds of missions. So my first thing that I'm most excited about is bringing those communities together. And I hope that through that process, a lot of the stigma and assumptions that competitive players may make about casual players and vice versa, I hope we kind of get to play together and all see that, we're not boogeyman, we're not like bad people. It's not like casuals just don't care about winning and they just want to like, play, narrative. Like I really hope that that kind of unified mission means that we all get to kind of play together and that community kind of becomes closer. So that's like the one thing that I'm really looking forward to. And then the second thing is, my whole mentality always has been, um, like any game I play, um, I want to win. Like so, if I play Monopoly, I don't play a game of Monopoly hoping that I don't win. Of
Right.
course, I want to win.
Of course.
Now that doesn't mean I'm going to do anything. I'm not going to cheat, right? I'm not gonna like steal money from the bank, which I think a lot of people actually do in Monopoly. But I think that mentality of like, hey, you play any game, whether it's a board game, Warhammer, or something else, people like to win. So I think hopefully, I think for me, the most important thing has always been doing it the right way. And if I had to play, if I had to choose between playing and painting, I would pick painting, 100%. Like
Interesting.
I would never play if I had to pick. Like even when I stopped playing 40K, I still painted. Like I love hobby. I love painting. I love reading the books, like the lore. I'm so into it. And I really think there's like this maybe stigma that like, oh, if you play competitively, all you care about is like playing with gray plastic and beating your opponent over the head. But for me, I really approach the hobby kind of as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certain areas that I like more than others. But I think if there's anything I can kind of dispel, it's this notion that like competitive players or tournament players are like, one track win at all costs. I think that's such a toxic attitude and approach. Just if I thought that all casual players were just like, mouth breathers and didn't know how to play games and just wanted to like, smash their models together, like that would be such a bad way to look at non-competitive players. And I don't. And for me, what I love about this hobby is being able to share it. Like, as you said, Dave, like you don't play competitively. We could not be more different,
Mm-hmm.
but being able to just talk to you about 40K and share that passion, that for me is like this for me is like what I love about it.
Yeah.
More than the game, more than like anything else. It's like I can share this amazing hobby with someone that has that same love for it, even if we might play differently on the tabletop.
Yeah.
And I think I hope some of your listeners and people that maybe have stayed away from tournament or competitive play, maybe they hopefully give it another shot, and hopefully they meet some people like me that can kind of shepherd them into it gradually and in a way that they feel like, hey, they actually see why I enjoy it, right? And hopefully maybe next time I'm in Ontario, which I am quite a bit, I'll come down and we can play some narrative games and you kind of show me your side of it, and or whenever I'm able to fly again, because it's kind of hard right now. But
yeah, no, absolutely. I like how you said narrative games, because if we play competitively, it'd be like, okay, turn one. All right, good game.
yeah,
Nice.
and the reason I love games like Necromunda and Mordheim and Blood Bowl is because of those are my favorite GW games because of the narrative elements.
Yeah.
That's because of all the stories and like the team and like I have backstories from my Necromunda gang and all this kind of stuff. Like I love that aspect of the game.
Yeah.
I just choose to play my 40K slightly different, but like when it comes to other GW games, I definitely play more narrative. So
Yeah.
I think that's possible. I think you can do it all. I think you can have your cake and eat it too when it comes to 40K and Games Workshop and miniature gaming as a whole.
I agree. I think there can exist a player that kind of enjoys every aspect of the hobby, and as you said, kind of does it holistically. And I think you embodied that really well, to be honest. And I think if there were more competitive players like you, the stigma would certainly be lessened. So I think you're a good representative of the competitive community.
I hope so.
And yeah, just keep doing what you're doing, man. It's fun.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Good discussion. You're certainly welcome back on the Shrine anytime. And
I was really happy that this whole thing is called Shrine of Chaos. I'm like, I feel like I'm at home.
You're definitely at home, man. All right, thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. Stay tuned next week. Actually, next week I won't be on, but the week after that, it's Wednesdays, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Happy wargaming, and we'll see you in the next episode.